My name is Traleg Rinpoche, and it really is a great pleasure for me to be participating in this documentary piece on Trungpa Rinpoche's life, known as Crazy Wisdom. I think the sadhana of mahamudra, if we try to sort of understand it in a really fundamental way, I think what he was trying to do was to say that there's a method and then there's the realization. And I think what Trungpa Rinpoche was trying to put across is that method and realization should go together by not focusing too much on the method, but focus on the realization.
You call the method?
The method being the sadhana, mahamudra being the realization aspect of one's practice. So sadhana meaning implementation of the practice.
Oh, okay.
So you practice certain things, in this case, practicing mahamudra, and then trying to realize mahamudra. What he was saying is that the realization and the practice should be brought together because the realization is in the practice itself. In other words, not to think of them as being separate, which is what we often do.
What you just said is that we often, when we learn to do something, like meditation or even yoga or whatever we learn to do, that we tend to separate what that thing is about really and focus on doing it and kind of making something out of that, and therefore separating it more from what it's supposed to do?
Yes, I think it's really a question about being and doing. So if you think of mahamudra as describing how to be, then the mahamudra sadhana would be like the technique used to sort of get into that state of being in such a way that the practice and the way of being are integrated, brought together. And that's what sadhana of mahamudra really emphasizes, I think, being and doing.
Could you tell me what is mahamudra?
Mahamudra, put simply, means getting into one's own authentic state of being. So go into oneself in such a manner that one's own physical and mental state of being are at ease. There is no sort of conflict between what one wants to be and what one is, what one aspires to be, and what one believes oneself to be, and so on.
So the sadhana mahamudra talks about the state of the world being in a desperate state, really. There's a lack of honesty, there's tremendous greed, and so forth, materialism. And could you talk a little bit about what he's talking about there, and how that relates to the state of the world as well?
I think Trungpa Rinpoche, when he mentions materialism, I think he had something actually lot more profound thing to say about it than what we may associate with that particular word. Insofar as people think of materialism as being something that is different to being spiritual or whatever. But I think he was saying something much more profound than that. I think what he was saying was that we can be materialistic about all kinds of things, all manner of things, including spiritualism itself, and he called it spiritual materialism. So even in this context, I think what he's talking about is actually the idea of getting fixated and holding on to things that by nature you cannot really hang on to, because things being transient, you have to sort of live with it, and you have to dance with life, you have to dance with the world, you have to dance with whatever is going on. So it's a question of learning to be with what's happening rather than thinking what is the case or what has happened or what has to be the case or what must be the case, things like that. And these kind of thinking suggests a materialistic way of viewing the world, which Trungpa Rinpoche was really sort of instructing us to get away from.
About that in terms of 40 years later, from after writing the sadhana, that how the state of the world reflects what he was talking about, reflects our desire to try to make the world be the way we want it to be.
Yeah, I think Trungpa Rinpoche's messages are even more important now than ever before, because I really do believe, as a reader of many of his books, that he had so much to say about how to integrate the Western worldview with Buddhist worldview, and not just with Buddhist worldview, but with sort of Eastern way of thinking generally, and how to bring them together. And I think what he was teaching in his works is something that we can all learn about, and we must implement. And I really believe that, and I think even now there's tremendous need for it. The thing is, people are very hasty in judging what it is that we need to do to bring Buddhism to the West. Trungpa Rinpoche, as you know, gave a lot of thought in terms of how to do that. So, as far as I'm concerned, instead of reinventing the world, we should be listening to Rinpoche's teachings more, so that what we need to do will become more clear, just simply by trying to make his vision come true. And that I really believe that to be true. Really, personally, I don't have anything to gain by praising Trungpa Rinpoche these days. But the reason why I do it is precisely because of that I really do believe he brought something totally different to the West, and he brought something totally different to Buddhism, because Buddhism had not yet was put in that kind of context, the Western context, that is. Buddhism was not thought of as being relevant to Buddhism. It was something exotic and far off, and people used to read Lobsang Rampa and Alexander David New and so on. And then they read Trungpa Rinpoche's books, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, or even before that, Myth of Freedom and so on. And then people started to think of Buddhism in a new light, as something practical, something that you can actually use. And as you know, Trungpa Rinpoche really demystified Buddhism and made Buddhism something really practical and something real for people. You don't have to leave your family and move to the Himalayas to practice Buddhism. He said, you can be a business executive and be a Buddhist. And he was one of the very first Buddhist teachers to do that. And I think that's very important.
Can you talk a little bit about what do you think? I don't know if there's anything quite how to say about it, but he as he did these things, creating a university and buying the land for a retreat center, and we never had any money. We didn't know how to create a university, and he would just say, "Okay, I'm going to do a university." All right.
And it happened.
And it happened.
Yes.
Because he tried. He actually didn't do a lot, except he made everything happen.
I think this is that really relates to the sadhana of mahamudra, that whole idea. As I mentioned, the notion of really being in one's own authentic state and then doing things, somehow if we can really bring them together, we can make things happen. So in other words, without being totally impractical, we've been talking about the idea that Trungpa Rinpoche was very practical and he made Buddhism practical and sort of acceptable to Western people. But on the other hand, he made it practical by bringing practicality in a different sense, by saying, if you really can be in yourself and then you believe in it, things will happen and things would come into existence. And that, I'm sure, is true. And I think that's why, Naropa came into existence, and Karma Chuling, and all the centers, Shambhala centers, came into existence because he was being himself. He was in himself. And that is the mahamudra way of being. And whatever he did manifested from that state of being. So being and acting, being and doing, there was no conflict. Because normally we want to do things, but we know that I'm not that. I'm trying to prove something. I'm saying, I know deep down, I don't believe in any of this kind of thing that I have to do. So I'll do it anyway because this is what is expected of me, or this is what I have to do. But there's this huge gap between being and doing. And I think Trungpa Rinpoche was the first Tibetan Buddhist teacher to really show